Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and in this video I'm going to talk about artillery. Yeah, I know, boo hiss, blah blah blah. Specifically, we're going to talk about artillery SPG missions, for the personal missions, for those of you who are interested in them. I'm going to focus on the Stug missions, but I am going to occasionally, I imagine, make reference to some of the missions for the other reward tanks. I should note, the reason that this video has come significantly later than my medium tank, light tank, heavy tank, TD mission 15 videos, if you will, is because playing lots of artillery at once makes me a very frustrated individual. So I tend to play it, I try and intersperse playing it with playing other things. Now that does mean that I'm perhaps not as good an artillery player as I might be if I played it solidly for a while. That's how I became a better light tank player, for example, just by playing nothing but light tanks. But playing artillery just frustrates me and annoys me in a way that playing light tanks doesn't. So yeah, deal with it. It's how I keep my sanity. So it means that it's taken me a little longer to complete SPG 15. So I'm just going to initially briefly talk through the SPG missions that you have for the Stug. Again, this is the Stug. Most of these missions are relatively straightforward, and you'll just get by. I mean, all of these you can just get by playing the game. You don't have to do anything special, really, generally speaking, to get them. So the first one, score at least 3 hits that cause damage to enemy vehicles. Doesn't really matter. I mean, I guess you could argue that it's easier to do that in one of the rapid firing artillery, so at the lower tiers or maybe the mid tiers rather than the high tiers, because at the high tiers, you know, you're looking at very long reload times and very large amounts of alpha damage. So easier at the lowest tier that you can do all these, and of course all of these missions can be done at a minimum of tier 4. So this one's easier at the lower tiers. Hidden and dangerous, cause at least 500 hit points of damage to enemy vehicles, remain unspotted during the battle, survive the battle. This is one that I disagree with on principle. It is not a particularly difficult mission to do, but if you have already got your 500 damage, do you know what the easiest... oh no, I take it back, sorry. It used to be that the easiest way to then make sure you weren't spotted during the battle was just to go and throw yourself into a lake. Wargaming have since they changed the mission, sorry I only just noticed this because I completed this mission ages ago, added survive the battle to as one of the primary objectives. So screw you, you can't do that anymore, which is absolutely fantastic. Secondary, destroy an enemy vehicle. Yeah, sure, it's not particularly difficult. Do that in whatever machine you want. Third one, cause at least 1,000 hit points of damage to enemy vehicles, win the battle as the secondary. It will be easier at higher tiers, because at higher tiers you have bigger guns doing more damage, but you can certainly achieve this. Certainly at tier 5 is not particularly difficult. Tier 4, not trivial, but tier 5 and 6 is certainly not difficult at all. Break on through. Damage or destroy enemy vehicles, modules, or injure crew members of this crew, totaling at least 3 modules and crew members. The numbers of damaged/destroyed modules and injured crew members across all enemy vehicles you have damaged in the battle are added together. You're firing high caliber HE rounds as an artillery piece. Critical hits, which is what that's after, not hard. It's worth pointing out, damage or destroy enemy vehicle modules, as written at least, that includes tracks, and you blow off tracks all the time, so that's really not a hard mission to achieve. Do it at whatever tier you want. Secondary condition, win the battle, hurrah. SPG 5, calculate and obliterate. Cause damage exceeding 4 times the hit points of your vehicle. Damage caused to allies is not counted. I should hope it's not. Secondary, destroy an enemy vehicle. Again, not particularly difficult. I mean, if you're down at tier 5, the typical hit points of a tier 5 artillery piece, about 250. So you're basically back to do 1,000 damage if you're playing it at tier 5. Not a difficult mission to do at all. Possibly, arguably, I would say it's probably easier at the higher tiers, because if you just compare and contrast, for example, tier 5 artillery piece has about 250 health, tier 8 artillery piece has about 400 health. It's easier to do 1,600 damage in a tier 8 artillery piece than it is to do 1,000 damage in a tier 5 artillery piece. So this one is actually probably easier if you do it at a higher tier. SPG 6, the Falling Hammer. Destroy at least 2 enemy vehicles of the same tier as your vehicle or higher. Really not difficult. You just need to be shooting your tier vehicles or above. Don't specifically target them and not target a more valuable target. There were way too many targets in that sentence that doesn't fall within that criteria. Just play and you'll eventually complete that at any old tier. It really doesn't matter. Obviously tier 4 and above, in order to actually complete the mission, you have to be at least tier 4. Roll out the big guns. Destroy an enemy tank destroyer or artillery piece. Again, really not particularly difficult. Any old tier will do the job. Secondary, cause at least 1,000 hit points of damage. If you want the secondary, it's easier therefore to do this mission at the higher tiers. But if you just want the primary completed, any old tier will do it. SPG 8, heavy fire on heavy tanks. Primary conditions, cause at least 1,000 hit points of damage to enemy heavy tanks. Secondary, destroy an enemy heavy tank. Well, this is one of those that's easier at higher tiers for a couple of reasons. One, you only get heavy tanks introduced at tier 3 now because of the Japanese, but really, proper heavy tanks you only get from tier 5, so if you play a tier 4 artillery piece, you will be meeting fewer heavy tanks than if you play tier 8, for instance. So, to get the damage on heavy tanks, higher tier is easier, and you need a certain amount of damage. That's just easier to do at a higher tier, so you're better off playing a higher tier SPG for this, but you can complete it at tier 5. Tier 5 would be awkward, but possible. Tier 6, similar things apply. You're better off doing it at the higher tiers, but you can do it at lower tiers if you really need to. SPG 9, lead them till you hit them. Damage an enemy vehicle that is moving at a speed of at least 20 km an hour. Both splash damage and the damage caused by direct hits is counted. Damage caused by ramming is not counted. Secondary, survive. This is harder to do in things like the Bishop and the Burt, the FE304, because they have very high shell arcs, very long shell travel times, and so predictive fire can be difficult. But generally speaking, you just need to land a hit or a splash damage or whatever on a tank that's moving at more than 20 km an hour. It's not actually that hard. Do it at whatever tier you want. SPG 10, the Bane of Artillery. Destroy at least one enemy SPG. Again, not hard. Later on, subsequent missions, this becomes destroy at least 2 enemy SPGs. This is in one battle, of course. Destroy at least 3 enemy SPGs, I assume, and so on and so forth. So at higher tiers, this can get more frustrating, but on later reward tanks. But down here for the Stug IV, destroy 1 enemy SPG. Not hard, just play the game. To get the secondary mission completed, that requires, well, I mean, you can do it at lower tiers, but cause at least 1,000 hit points of damage is easier at higher tiers. So, yeah. You'd probably be quite happy doing this about tier 6, if we're going to be honest. SPG 11, the Area of Effect. Primary conditions, destroy an enemy vehicle with a single shot. Only targets that received no prior damage in the battle are counted. Secondary, win the battle. You might think the name of this mission is a bit curious, but before they changed these missions in patch, I think it was actually patch 9.8, this mission used to be hit 2 enemies with 1 shot. They since changed that. It's now just 1 shot a bad guy who's hasn't taken any damage so far that game. Again, not particularly difficult. Just play the game with your SPGs and eventually this will come to you. Subsequently, this mission becomes hit 2 enemy tanks with 1 shot, for example, for the T-28 heavy tank concept. I haven't unlocked, that's a lie, I have unlocked the missions for the T-55A, but I haven't looked at the SPG missions for the T-55A, so I don't know what they involve. But later on, you do want to hit multiple targets with 1 shot, so this is going to be easier at the higher tiers, because at the lower tiers you just don't really have the splash damage to do that. It's also going to be easier in things like German, American, or Soviet machines compared to, for example, French or British, unless we're talking about the CGC at tier 10. I did this for the T-28 with the Lorraine 155-51 using premium HE ammo to get as much explosive radius as I could. I actually did it on Himmelsdorf of all maps. But really, later on, you want to be playing those nations that get lots of splash damage. The Americans would be good for that. But down here for the Stug, you just have to one-shot someone. It's not particularly hard to do. Hell, you can do it in something like a Bishop that has pretty anemic alpha damage for an artillery piece of its tier. SPG 12, the Striker. Be among the top 3 players on your team by damage caused. Destroy an enemy vehicle. Secondary, win the battle. Just play. There's nothing particular to do here, just play and this will come eventually to you. SPG 13, the artillery battery, personal/platoon. So this is one of the 2 platoon missions. Cause at least 15% of the total damage caused to enemy vehicles by your team. Damage caused by platoon mates counts. Win the battle. Can be completed either on your own as part of a platoon. Just do damage. If you've got friends to platoon up with or clanmates, great. If you haven't, just invite people to dynamic platoons when you get into a game and eventually you'll complete it. Not particularly hard. Joint offensive. Cause at least 2,000 hit points of damage to enemy heavy tanks and tank destroyers. Damage caused by platoon mates counts. Blah 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 blah. Ditto applies for the platooning part. If you're trying to do this at lower tiers, so a tier 4 machine, a tier 5 machine, a tier 6 machine, this becomes significantly easier if you are in a platoon. If, however, you're on your own, you don't want to platoon for whatever reason, you don't want to have a dynamic platoon or whatever, then this is much easier to do at higher tiers because again you've got that minimum damage requirement. So if you want to do this on your own, tier 6 plus, probably tier 7 plus, tier 6 artillery can certainly do it, but it would require a fairly decent game. Hell, tier 5 artillery can do it, but again it requires a rather nice game. The easiest way to do this though is to jump into a high tier artillery piece and be in a platoon, whether it's a dynamic platoon or one you've set up beforehand, because then 2,000 hit points of damage at tier 8 or 9 or whatever in an SPG is, generally speaking, or in an SPG plus platoon mates, is trivial. So that shouldn't be particularly difficult. And then you've got War Gods. Be among the top 3 players on your team by experience earned and damage caused. Cause at least 2,000 hit points of damage. Survive the battle. So, again, minimum amount of damage caused requirement means that it's easier to complete this at the higher tiers compared with the lower tiers. The experience earned, the damage caused, I mean, this is just one of those things that you just keep plugging away and eventually you'll get it. There aren't any particular tips other than, I guess, if you had a choice, pick the higher tier targets, because the higher tier targets, generally speaking, your HE rounds, unless you're playing very low tier artillery, don't really care what tier target they're shooting at. So pick the higher tier targets because you'll get a positive or greater than 1 XP multiplier for doing so. Bazinga, you get more experience. Worth pointing out, if you do not need to complete the secondary condition, i.e. survive the battle, you can lose. In fact, it might even be preferable if you did lose, because then often that means that your team sucked, and if you can put in a reasonable performance, you can fairly happily come toward the top of your team on damage and experience. Whereas if your team does well, that's going to be more difficult. And in fact, the game I'm going to show you, that is the case. Clearly, if you need to do this with the secondary conditions, you need to win. So try to win. Anyway, that's enough of my waffle. Let's go and have some gameplay. So, here we have the game in which I completed SPG Mission 15 for the Stug IV. I haven't completed SPG 15 for the T28 heavy tank concept yet. Done all the others, but not the SPG one. But it's basically the same. In fact, it's exactly the same mission, but now the minimum requirement is for you to be playing a tier 5 and above machine in line with the rest of the T28 missions, as opposed to a tier 4 and above machine. So this game would actually have completed that mission as well, if I had had that mission unlocked at the time. So this is a tier 9 game. I'm in my Lorraine 15550-1. I've since unlocked the tier 9 Batchat, so I'm not playing this tank anymore. But this was in the Lorraine. And we're here on Steps. Steps is not a bad arty map. It's fairly big, wide and open, so getting shots on people isn't too difficult. And I'm just pre-aiming at a location where I think it's fairly likely that we'll see some bad guys. Object 704, not a good shot on him though, because he is on the reverse slope of a hill, but that Foch, hello Mr. Foch, he was spotted, and fire, hit, because you didn't see the explosion, and as it turns out that was actually a penetrating shot for something like 1300 damage. He seems a little surprised, as you can see in chat. So, Yag Tiger, Object 704, E75, we shall happily take advantage of these guys. Now it's worth pointing out, of course, that the Foch was saying he wasn't spotted. He had been spotted, as I inform him, and we splashed that Jagdtiger. It's worth pointing out that at the time when I played this, I didn't. I'd completed all the other missions for the Stug IV, all the other mission number 15s with honours. I was only doing this for the female crew member, so I've absolutely no need to complete this mission with honours, which is a good thing considering the shots I'd been taking. The teams I'd been getting. And actually, to give credit to that Foch on the enemy team, he said he wasn't spotted. I said he was, and he said, "Oh, fair enough, my bad, nice shot. I didn't see Sixth Sense goes off," which happens. It's sometimes quite easy to not see Sixth Sense go off. If it had gone off, I imagine he would likely have not just sat there in the open waiting for me to blat him. Now, you may be looking at the teams and thinking, holy mother of God, and yes, you would be right, that is indeed a 1-5 scoreline. And with artillery, if things go very south for you, there isn't really much you can do about it. You just don't have the DPM, the armour, the view range, the carry potential to achieve a huge amount with it. So, Chi-Ri just got completely annihilated, but, well, there we go. I took the shot at him because I was already aimed at him, and as it turned out, my shot didn't hit, so I didn't even manage to pick up the kill, even though he was on a pathetic amount of health. So, there we go. Of course, oh, it doesn't show my secondaries for my mission for some reason. Go figure. Now, of course, 1-9, 1-10, it doesn't take a genius to work out. Spoiler alert, this game is not going to be a victory. Can we do something about that Lerva? Nah. We actually gave that shot a little bit too much lead. I mean, we've done a respectable amount of damage so far. But there's 4 of us left now. We just can't. We're just not going to be able to pull this back. But that's not the end of the world, because I don't need this mission done with honours. I think honours is you have to win the game. But for, I'm recording this first, but I'll have already gone through the exact requirements in the garage by the time you're watching this. So, yeah, I don't need it with honours, and so screw it, basically. I'm just preparing myself to hopefully derp this waffle tractor in the face, which I do. But not long for this world, and there we go, I die. But, as I was saying, we did actually manage to rack up quite a nice amount of damage. Just got this last IS-8, who is being swarmed by tank destroyers, including that Foch, who survived right to the very end. Despite taking a 155mm shell through the roof. So, fair play to him. Anyway, that was the game. I mean, you know it wasn't a complete disaster, from my perspective at least, because I completed SPG 15 with this, so let's go and have a quick look at the results. So, there we go. As you can see there, SPG 15 War Gods completed, but we didn't complete the secondary. We came second on our team by experience, first on our team by damage done with 2,835 damage, you know, a good half of which was that opening shot on the Foch. The enemy team, their Chi-Ri, pulled a very nice game. 2,600 damage in a Chi-Ri in a tier 9 game. Well played to him. Object 704, also nice amount of damage. M53, nice amount of damage. So well played to them. 6 shots fired, 3 hits, 3 pens for that damage count. Damaged 5 enemy vehicles, wasn't able to get any kills. Also picked up 500 assistance damage, and unusually, on a defeat, we actually made a profit, and would have still made a profit, even were we running a standard account at the time, in credits that is. So yes, that's how you cheekily complete SPG 15, even when your team sucks. Worth, of course, pointing out that if you are trying to complete SPG with honours, that game would not be sufficient. You would actually, clearly, want to win the game, but I didn't need to, so that's the game you are looking at. Hopefully that might give a little bit of incentive to those guys who are still trying to complete the artillery missions for the Stug IV, or, you know, the artillery missions for any of the other tanks, actually. And despite it being an artillery video, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.